Right now, your phone knows what day it is before you even open your eyes. It'll remind you of a birthday, a bill, a flight, a doctor's appointment, down to the minute. You've probably never once had to wonder what season it is. But strip that away. No phone. No wall calendar. No app quietly counting for you. Now answer this. How do you know when to plant your food before you starve? How do you know when the herd you depend on is about to migrate? How do you know, 6 months from now, that your entire village needs to be somewhere else? Somebody had to figure that out first. And they didn't have a single number to write it down with. In the middle of the Sahara, a place that is bone-dry, brutal, and empty today, there's a circle of stones older than Stonehenge by at least 1,000 years. It was built by people who left no writing behind. No numerals. No script. And yet those stones are aligned, with unsettling precision, to the summer solstice, the exact day the sun sits at its highest point in the sky. People with no written language built a machine for tracking time out of rock. That's not a myth. That's archaeology. So here's what we're really asking tonight. 2 questions, and they're harder than they sound. 1. How do you measure something invisible, a full year, when you have no numbers and no writing? 2. How do you get an entire community to agree on time, together, without a shared system to point to? Because tracking a year alone is one puzzle. Getting 100 people, then 1,000, then a civilization, to all agree on when, that's a completely different problem. By the end of this, you'll understand something most people never think about. The calendar isn't just a tool. It's one of the first things humans ever built together, out of pure necessity, to survive. And once you see how it was built, you'll never look at a wall calendar, or a phone notification, the same way again. A bone with tally marks cut into it, 20,000 years old. A cave painting that might be a star map. A flood that came, without fail, on the same day every year. A farmer poet in ancient Greece, watching one single star rise. A mathematician in Athens who finally cracked the code the moon had been hiding. This is the story of how humanity learned to hold time in its hands. Long before farming, before villages, before anything we'd call civilization, someone in Central Africa picked up a small bone and a sharp flint, and started cutting notches into it. Today, archaeologists call it the Ishango bone. It's covered in groups of marks, some in clusters of 10, some in patterns that repeat. Nobody can say for certain what it counted. Days. Moon phases. Something else entirely. But here's the hidden revelation. This might be the oldest surviving proof that a human being looked at time and thought, I need to remember this. I need to make it permanent. That single decision, to turn a passing moment into a mark that outlives it, is the seed every calendar on Earth grew from. Before we had words for the future, we had cuts in a bone to hold our place in it. But counting days is one thing. Counting an entire year, 365 of them, without losing track? That takes something bigger than a bone. It takes the sky itself. On the walls of the Lascaux caves in France, there are dots. Sequences of them, painted beside animals, that some researchers believe track the phases of the moon, a rough, working lunar calendar, painted in mineral pigment by torchlight. The moon was the obvious first clock. It's the only calendar that writes itself across the sky every single night, changing shape in a cycle anyone could learn to recognize. Because the moon's cycle repeats roughly every 29.5 days, early humans could count moons the way we count months, and suddenly, a season wasn't just a vague feeling. It was a number you could hold on to. But the moon has a flaw. 12 full moons don't add up cleanly to one solar year. They fall about 11 days short. Which means a purely lunar calendar slowly drifts out of sync with the actual seasons. Follow the moon alone for a few years, and eventually you're planting crops in what should be winter. Someone was going to have to notice that mistake. And it would take a civilization whose entire survival depended on precision to catch it. In ancient Egypt, one event mattered more than any other. The annual flooding of the Nile. It brought the fertile silt that fed the entire civilization. Miss its timing, and you starve. Predict it correctly, and you feed a kingdom. The Egyptians noticed something extraordinary. Just before the flood arrived, a particular star, Sirius, which they called Sopdet, would reappear on the eastern horizon after months of being invisible, rising just before the sun. Because that star's return lined up almost perfectly with the flood, year after year, Egyptian priest astronomers built an entire calendar around it. A 365-day year, one of the most accurate calendars the ancient world had ever produced. They didn't control the flood. They just learned to read its warning, written in starlight. But a calendar built for a river doesn't help a farmer standing in a wheat field 1,000 miles away, under a completely different sky. Somewhere else, someone had to solve the same problem, with nothing but grain, dirt, and stars. Around 700 BCE, a Greek farmer and poet named Hesiod wrote something remarkable. A poem called Works and Days, part farming manual, part survival guide, written in verse so it could be memorized and passed down without needing to be read. Hesiod told farmers to watch the Pleiades, a small, tight cluster of stars, and to begin harvest when they rose before dawn, and begin plowing when they set. No written calendar. No numbers. Just a pattern in the sky, tied directly to the fate of the crop in the ground. Hesiod wasn't inventing a system from scratch. He was preserving oral, sky-based knowledge that farming communities had likely used for centuries, long before anyone thought to write it down. The poem is a snapshot of an unwritten calendar that had already been keeping people alive for generations. For most of human history, the calendar wasn't a document. It was a poem, a memory, a promise passed from one farmer to the next. Star calendars worked. Moon calendars worked. But none of them lined up with each other, and that mismatch was about to become a real, mathematical problem someone would have to solve out loud, in public, in the middle of a city. By 432 BCE, in Athens, an astronomer named Meton had been watching the same flaw that had haunted every lunar calendar before him, that 11-day gap between the moon's year and the sun's year. Meton discovered something the numbers had been hiding. If you follow 19 solar years, the phases of the moon land on almost the exact same calendar dates again. 19 years, and the drift resets itself. Because he'd found that hidden rhythm, Meton proposed inserting extra leap months at set points across those 19 years, keeping the lunar and solar calendars locked together instead of drifting apart. Athens reportedly inscribed his findings in gold letters in a public square, so the whole city could set their time by it. It took 19 years of patient watching to fix an 11-day mistake, and once it was fixed, an entire city could finally agree on a single word: today. A bone that refused to forget. A cave ceiling that mapped the moon. A star that warned a civilization when to plant. A poem that carried the sky's instructions from one farmer to the next. And a stubborn 19-year pattern that finally made time make sense. Every time your phone buzzes with a reminder, it's running on the tail end of a chain that stretches back through Meton's 19 years, through Hesiod's field, through Egyptian priests scanning the horizon for one star, through a painter in a cave, all the way back to a hand cutting marks into a bone by firelight. None of them had what you have. No app. No number system for most of that story. Just the sky, careful attention, and the refusal to let a moment simply disappear. So the next time your calendar reminds you of something, a birthday, a deadline, a season changing, remember, you're not just checking a date. You're holding the end of a 20,000-year-old thread. And someone, long before writing existed, started pulling it just so you could get here.